Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Alisha here at Cosmic Gateway, and I am joined by Louise today. So I'm very excited to introduce her. She is a former psychiatric nurse, and she's also intuitive empath. So I recently connected with Louise, and I was very taken by her experience, her life journey, and just a wealth of knowledge and information. So just a little bit of an intro, Louise. Started her career over 30 years ago in psychiatrics and has sort of been witness to many interesting, I guess, understandings in the medical institution. But because she also has her abilities as an intuitive and empath, I guess she has a very unique perspective of one that is very aligned with, my thoughts and experiences through working through mental health. So welcome, Louise. Thank you so much for being here and having this chat.
Thank you, Alisha. Yeah, I'm rapt to be able to share a little bit about my life and work with you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I know that you've got so much to share, and I want to hear as much as you've got to give. And I really hope that this is going to be helpful information for people. I know that recently you've had to change your career because of certain mandates and things like that. So I don't know where you want to begin. Do you want to talk about how you got into your profession and then out of it? Or,
yeah, look, I'll start from the start if you like.
Yeah, start from the start.
When I was born. Well, literally was. So I was born into a family that would be considered mentally ill. So my mother had been through the war in Europe as a child and an adolescent, and come out with what we'd probably call post-traumatic stress syndrome now. But she also was under the influence of some pretty dark entities at times in her life. So, what we'd call a psychosis or a psychotic event, Mum would have that quite regularly, often aligned with her, menstrual cycle, unfortunately, PMT on steroids with, so she could be, it was a pretty tough time growing up because you'd have a loving parent for half the time, and then the other half of the time you'd basically have someone who you were afraid to open your mouth or be around. And it wasn't physical abuse, but certainly psychological abuse, so that went throughout my childhood. And my father was a lot older than my mum, and he was Australian, and they got married without meeting each other. He was the second marriage for him. That she wanted to get out of communist Poland, and they met via a pen pal, and they wrote to each other, and she came out married without meeting him, which wasn't a good thing for either of them really, because they weren't compatible. And Dad at the time again had mental illness, so much so that he'd lost his first marriage as a result of it, and had estranged himself from his family. Wow. So, and he had the mental illness along with alcoholism at that time, and and a lot of paranoia about women and them having affairs. So that's what my mum came into. So I grew up sort of in that situation. Dad was 53 when I was born. So when I was growing up, he was quite elderly, and he'd had a fall at 60 and developed symptoms of Parkinson's, along with the more paranoia and dementia from that. So when I was a teenager, he was already quite unwell. He was on a wheelie walker, and thinking the army was coming up the driveway to get him. So there was a lot of disharmony in the family, a lot of illness. So it's all I kind of knew. So going into nursing, and I went into aged care and psychiatric was a natural progression, because that's what I knew, really.
Right, yeah. I didn't know that about you, but it makes a lot of sense. Of like, I didn't realize that was sort of the upbringing that you experienced. But is it because, what do you feel like reflecting now in terms of your motive? Was it that you wanted answers, or you wanted to explore healing, or like being able to help because of what you went through in your family dynamic? Or is it just because that's what you knew and that was a transition?
I think my soul chose it because I always knew I was going to be a nurse. My mum did tell me when I was 5, she said I told her I was going to grow up and be a nurse and drive a Mini Minor. And I grew up, my first car was a Suzuki Hatch, you know, like the Gets, the tiny little car. So I literally did what I said I was going to do.
Wow,
so,
it was, okay, you're just following yourself path to a T there.
Yeah. And it was it was tough. I mean, I guess all of us here that do the work, you know, consciously, if it's trial by fire, isn't it, really, you know? And that's what I was given. I mean, I do remember at 12 just wishing I was dead, and I prayed that I could die, and that's when I had my first experience of really feeling spirit, you know that I had that love energy come around me, and that just gave me the strength. I knew there was more to it. You know, at that time, I think that's probably when I really opened to it. But I was always a person that was sensitive and really aware of how unjust the world was, and I couldn't understand really what was happening, you know, why there was good people around me, because, you know, my parents weren't always sort of in disharmony, but there was, you know, my friends, and why the world the way, you know, why was there war? Why was there, you know, all the big questions. So as a child, I had those. Yeah.
So 12 was your earliest memory of sort of having a spiritual awareness?
Awareness, yes, most definitely, yeah. But, you know, then I went through the terrible teens, as you do. And so, you know, it was, you know, so, you know, all that went behind through adolescence. And, you know, I just, you know, had normal sort of, well, not normal, but, you know, I did the best I could and got through school. I was fairly high achiever in high school, and you know, but I'll give you an example of the dark. So I think I got a report with 26 A's and 2 B's, and I came home and I was walking home, and the kids in front of me were rapt because they'd got a couple of B's and all the rest C's. And so I thought I'll show my mum, and literally she goes, "What did you get the B's for?" You know, that was the kind of response that I had growing up. And even as I went into adulthood, you know, I became a charge nurse and things like that, and there was never any acknowledgement of my career or my successes, you know, that type of thing. So it was a good tough start to my early life.
It's a commonality amongst those that are you know, doing the energy work and the frequency work, and on the path, I guess there is a lot of life experience and challenges. There we go, you're back.
Sorry.
So as you sort of transitioned into the beginning of your career, was that shocking and confronting, or do you think that you were kind of well prepared because of you know, growing up? And
I think I first started more with aged care. I started as a state enrolled nurse, which is a 1-year course back in the 80s. And so it was in a massive big public nursing home, basically, with the green vinyl walls. You know, the first sight I saw was a gentleman being wheeled down the corridor on a lifting machine with his bottom hanging out and defecating on the floor. So that was my first day type of thing. So a little bit confronting when you're young, you know. So and you know, just the level of suffering, you know, you don't understand. And there was old people, really for old people, but there was a lot of young people there too that had brain injuries, and, you know, and things had happened, and it was really inappropriate for both of them to be mixed together. So and it was basic care, you know, it wasn't bad care, but it was basic. It was a system that was like the military. So you get people up, you'd wash them, clean them, make the beds, put them to bed at lunchtime, and, you know, feed them, and, you know, it was very regimented. So there wasn't a lot of room for, you're very, very busy on the timeline, so there wasn't a lot of room for compassion. You're just too busy trying to keep the physical body from breaking down, you know.
Yeah. Oh goodness, it really takes a special person, you know. I admire people like you who've worked and dedicated, you know, a great portion of your life into the service in that way, because that's it was hard, but it taught me a lot. And that's probably where and it was in that institution that I had my real sort of awakening. So when I was a state enrolled nurse, and
there was actually two awakenings there. There was one lady, really, imagine a little sweet old lady like your cutest grandma, but she had to be nursed in her own room, and she'd been a darling in her life. Her family said how much she was gorgeous, and she was nursed in a big tub chair because she was so contracted she couldn't be in a bed. And it used to take two nurses to change her. She'd had a stroke, and so she could only move one side of her body. But we all had to psych ourselves into going. You literally stand at the door and psych yourself in to go and to look after her. So I was with a lovely nurse, and we were both standing there going, okay, let's do it. And unfortunately, we had to put a beanie over her eyes so she couldn't see you when you looked after her, because if she could see you, she'd try and sort of scratch at your face and your eyes, because she was so tormented. Mm. But so what would happen was, so, in her life, she was a sweet little old lady, but as soon as you went near her, she'd curse at you like a sailor. She'd be using the F and C words. So she'd be really combative. so there we are standing going, okay, we've got to change her, And it's hard enough doing, changing someone who's fighting you, because that's quite difficult in itself. So we had the beanie ready. And so as soon as we went in, she started with a tirade of the F and C's, which had never left her mouth prior to her stroke, according to her family.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and we looked in the room, and before she started with a tirade, we saw a black shadow float through the wall, and then it floated over her. And as soon as it floated over her, completely enveloped her, and that's when she started. So we both looked at each other and you go, did you see that? And we went, yep, we saw that. So that was my first realization, I guess, that there was something more going on than just a chemical imbalance or a brain injury or, frontal lobe damage that could cause, someone to change. There was an outside influence involved, definitely, with this lady.
Yeah, wow. And how old were you when that, roughly?
Oh, probably.
Well, how far were you into working?
Probably a year. That would be the first year, probably around 20, no, maybe 21, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So within your first year, you had that experience. So was that kind of divinely shown or orchestrated to kind of open your mind and perspective? Because, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong here, but would it be unique that someone has your gifts and abilities in that industry who can see it from the two worlds?
It is fairly unique, just because, it is a regimented, it really was based on the army nursing. So, 1,200 hours go and have you, this is back in the 80s, okay, so we're telling you a different time. We literally had the starch uniform. I was the last nurse to wear a cap in Victoria. We were the last to actually wear a cap. I had a stripy uniform. And we had the charge nurses with their, white uniforms and their belts with all the, decorations. You used to wear badges. It's really quite funny. We've still got them all somewhere. So it was a different world. So it was mainly people that weren't aware. There was occasional people that were, but if they were, they weren't talking.
Yeah, right. Yeah, gotcha. So how, let's sort of move forward. I'd love to hear more. This is something that intrigues me and always has. And, I've dabbled working in the mental health, and I've kind of had my own experiences, but, I've had my own thoughts around what I think, certain diagnoses really are, looking at from a spiritual vantage point, So I would love you to, if you have examples or share more knowledge around, experiences like that maybe people can see it from that, different vantage point to have a more greater perspective, I guess.
Sure. Well, where I worked initially as a state enrolled nurse, that was in I'll probably tell you the hospital, doesn't really matter. It was Heatherton Hospital, which still works as an aged care centre now. Then I went on to do my registered psychiatric nurse training. First of all, I did 1 year at Larundel, which is a great big asylum that was in Bundoora. It's closed now. There was Larundel, Mont Park, and there was another one too that was for people with more mental disabilities. So that area had the big asylums. So when I did a year at Larundel, I mainly worked on the back wards. So I didn't work where you'd have the acute, you know, when someone's coming in acute psychosis. So I mainly worked where there was elderly or people that were brain injured either through alcoholism. There was a whole ward just for people with alcoholic, you know, injuries. And yeah, so I didn't, so I was sort of, we called them the back wards. Okay, so then they were called that for a reason. They were at the back. It was a great big property, and they were your typical asylums. You know, they had the again the vinyl walls, the cell, basically cells with, you know, the glass slots. And I literally carried like Victorian housekeeper keys, you know, to go in. So it was a different world. It was a world you'd think of as, you know, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest world. It really was like that. And, you know, there was only a few nurses, and there was a lot of overseas nurses at the time because we were unable to get, you know, nurses to work in the industry at the time. So it was a whole, the experience of working there, I guess, showed me, I guess, how low people can go. Does that, if that makes sense? You can't have a less of a life than be alive with a psychiatric illness. The first injection I had to give was a man that he was a Eastern European gentleman and in his 40s, and he'd been an alcoholic, but he was violent, and he'd just become psychotic, and we'd have to put him in a seclusion room, and they had steel doors. The seclusion rooms had steel doors. And as I was a student nurse, they said, "Oh, you can give the first injection. You can." My first injection was, you know, they held like literally probably 8 people or 10 people held him down, and they pulled his pants down, exposed his buttock, and that was me giving my first injection. So I actually, I could never give an injection easily after that. It was so traumatic.
But you must have a lot of traumatic, you know.
Yeah. But this man, the reason we did do that is because he became so violent. He was literally, we felt he was going to break the door down. He had superhuman strength. Yeah. Okay. And, you know, so, you know, again, as I've gone on and knowing that there are influences from, you know, we could say demonic, dark entities, archonic, I feel that he was overtaken because a person could not do what he was doing, you know, and all we were really doing with the medications was just controlling it. We couldn't, no one got better. No one got better. We just kept them subdued. And, you know, and I did work with good people in psych nursing. I know there's a joke about psych nursing being crazy, but you have to be slightly crazy to do it, you know.
Right.
You know, because, and you have to have a high tolerance. And because I'd grown up with, you know, I had a high tolerance because I'd grown up in the disharmony and the, you know, the arguing and the psychosis. And so I already had that with me. So I you know, I'm looking back for this man. I knew something was wrong, but I guess I didn't have the insight as to why. I knew it wasn't normal or natural to what we'd been told.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I imagine the more that you grow in your own consciousness and awareness of these things over the years, do you reflect back and just see it totally differently?
I do, and I wish I'd known, but then I guess it wouldn't have been the learning if I did, you know. So I was shown in increments what I needed to know. And I think when we spoke the other day, my second awakening was again in that first hospital where we saw the spirit come across the lady, is when I was working with a nurse and I could hear a voice in my head, which you never talk about when you're in psych nursing. I could show you that now, no way. And the voice kept saying, it was a female voice, and I was working with a nurse called Anna. I'm sure she's long retired now. And the voice said, "Tell Anna I'm her sister and my name's Carmen." And, you know, I was like, I knew it was something as spiritual or esoteric, but I didn't understand what was happening to me. You know, I didn't feel I was going mad, but I knew that there was probably someone like a ghost around, you know. So I'm thinking, oh, it's probably a ghost, and I don't know why I'm hearing it. And so, but what happened was this, because I worked with Anna a lot, this spirit was constantly overshadowing me. And I guess if you know about overshadowing, if you've got someone in your auric field, that it was really draining, because she wasn't going to let up till I passed on the message. So I would go home and I'd be fatigued, I'd be drained, I just feel so lousy. And so in the end, every time I felt this spirit, in the end I thought, I'm just going to say it. So I said to Anna, I said, oh, I'm hearing a voice that says, you know, this is the lady here saying she's your sister, and her name's Carmen. I said, do you have a sister that's passed? And she said, oh, yes, I was born an identical twin, and my twin passed away at birth, but I don't know if she was named. So I thought, oh, that's good. So she went home and she asked her mum, and the name was Carmen, which was the name I was given. So that's how I first opened it up to, you know, mediumship, if you want to call it that way, you know. And after that, it was all right. I mean, that worked out okay for me, but after that, anytime I felt any spirit coming into my aura, I would just repel it, because I just didn't want to go through. I didn't know about protection. I didn't know about white lighting or gold lighting or bubbles, or, you know, all the things we know now. So it's actually made it quite difficult for me. You know, I still can do things. I still have got mediumship, you know, and it comes through, you know, in spite of me, you know.
Yeah, right.
I get surprise attacks. But so I opened up there to a higher consciousness, to know that there was more as well. So between the first one and that one, they were sort of around the same time. And also I was a very young mum. I had a child quite early, married quite early, 22, you know, the whole kit and caboodle. And again, I was that nurse in that little driving out of work from Kingston Centre in my little Suzuki hatch, and because I was a state enrolled nurse, all of us had to, there's like 200 of us, and we all had to clock off, you know, but the registered nurses, there was only, you know, a handful of them, they clock off. So we'd all line up to get out and drive out of the car park, and it was just, you know, it was 9:30 at night, and it was dark and rainy night, and I was in my Suzuki hatch, and because we rushed out, I didn't put my safety belt on, you know, very naughty, but it was just like, no, and it used to stick, so I'd be putting it on, like pulling it and trying to do it and drive, and I got onto Warrigal Road, and I heard a voice, external voice from outside of me say, Louise, male voice. And I know now it's Archangel Michael, because I do work with him a lot as well. And he said, put your safety belt on now, you're going to have an accident. So I'm like, oh, so I did the final whoosh, and put it on, and then went through the next intersection, one of the major intersections there, and a Tirana, do you remember the old Tiranas? He ran a red light and he T-boned me, and my car span into a pole. And if I hadn't had my safety belt on, I would have broken my neck. My head would have gone under the steering wheel. I've got some bad whiplash and some bad bruisings. I've got a scar on my leg, but I literally walked away, you know, from that. I didn't even go to the hospital. I should have. You know, car was written off, but, you know, like it was a miraculous escape. I mean, really, I should have just died.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was sort of my first year of nursing.
What a year. Oh my goodness.
You know, and it's not happening all the time. And that's what I want to emphasize to people. Like, you know, I lived my life. I was a mother, and, you know, I was working, you know, so these things are, you know, interspersed in between my life, you know. So I just part of being here, and I could have had a lot more experience, obviously, but part of being here is being here. You know, you have to be here. You have to ground. You can acknowledge the spirit, you can acknowledge your higher self and all the different realms, but, you know, we're here to be here, you know, and yeah.
I want to go back, because you sparked a story within me, and I was like, oh my God, when you were saying that first time you had the overshadowment of your colleague's sister's spirit and trying to get attention, I know, I want to bring it up because I know how draining that is, especially if it's like a first time or it's new to you. Working in the energetic realms and spirit can be incredibly draining on your, taxing on your energy, especially if you're not sure what's happening. And I remember my first one was when I was at work too. My first job was at McDonald's, and I worked in the drive-through. Well, I worked everywhere, but I was in drive-through and something switched on in me, and I think it was a 4 or 5 hour shift, taking the orders at the front, the first window.
Yeah.
They don't do that anymore. But anyway, and all of a sudden my psychic ability switched on. And every time I was taking the money from and that exchange, I was getting a download of this man was cheating on his wife and this person, and this went on for 5 hours. I went home completely zapped because I had just had all this influx of information and energy for 5 hours. It was like doing 5 hours worth of reading nonstop. I mean, obviously I didn't share that information.
No, look, in some ways that's worse, Alisha. Less just the spirit. It wasn't just everybody.
And it was all people's dark secrets. It wasn't even like fun stuff,
No.
I don't need to know this.
But you see how good it was. You do need to know it because it's all the dark stuff that leads you to the light stuff, isn't it, really?
It's what it's all about, right?
Yeah. And that's, look, and I guess, I think part of me talking about things is, a lot of people say, the new agey people. And I went through all the new age stuff too, because that was the only alternative, it was either that or religion, so
right.
It's not like we've got shamans, we didn't have many then, we're not in that kind of, society where it's accepted. So, but, it is dark. And I've been accused of, a good friend of mine lovingly says, you're too sympathetic to the dark. And I say, yeah, I am. I actually am, because we're in duality. And, it doesn't mean I'm going to go out and do evil things, but I can be, I can be dark and I can be light, and I can be happy and sad and angry and irritable, everything in between, and ask my children. And we're here to do all that, obviously not to try and go to the extremes, but but having said that, I'm always grounded, because you have to be. You can't live there. It's I remember talking to people that, I'm going to be famous and I'm going to do this. And then they was telling me that they would be driving and they'd lose consciousness because they're off, meditating in the car, and then be driving up the wrong side of the freeway. That's not what we're here for, it's,
actually, yeah.
It is, isn't it? We're here to live the human experience, and we're in duality. Yay. Let's be the best we can in it.
Right. And I know you mentioned to me, when we connected last week, about how it has been a very dark path for you in terms of your learning and understanding and, experiences, I guess, with different energies and entities. And I think I can understand that, being in some of the work environments that you've been in is very dark. It is very corrupted.
It is, and it's not the patients. it's the system. It's the those above. I had a lot of attacks in my work life and even more recently, through the dark, because they do know who the light workers are, and I do hold a lot of compassion. That's something my heart is always full of compassion, and and if I feel like I'm not being compassionate, it's probably because I'm protecting myself from something. It's you do have to do that sometimes. You can't give all your empathy over, otherwise it's too harmful to the system. So but I certainly, I won't go into all the details, but times in my career I just I'd failed something that I shouldn't have failed simply because the dark had created a situation around something, and that causes stress, and they like you to be stressed and out of your power and feeling bad. And I spent most of my life being anxious because I'm an empath, so, and stressed. So and I'm not ashamed of that. That's because that's how you have to be sometimes. If you're an empath, you'll have anxiety. It goes with it,
hand in hand. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are some of the most interesting discoveries that you've kind of come across in your years of working? I only had a brief encounter in comparison to you of working in sort of mental health and different sort of jobs that I've had. I worked in resi care as well. I'm having a lot of flashbacks now. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah.
You know, and being in very dangerous situations in my life in those, you know, because it is, you know, sometimes some days you go to work and, you know, you know, I was removed from one facility because one child was very abusive and tried to strangle me. You know, I mean, that's just one incident.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you've been in much more, more, you know, dangerous or terrifying situations. But I guess what the conclusion that I've always sort of come to is, you know, and this can be controversial. You know, I always sort of, when I talk about mental health, I always put it in inverted commas. And that I sort of have a vantage point or perception now that there is much more going on than just a diagnosis and just the symptoms. And I think when this really hit home for me, because it was just a concept, an idea that I had nothing to back it up with. It was just something that sort of my observations and the way that I think. But I, in one of my jobs, we had to do mental health training, first aid mental health training, which was incredibly triggering and, you know, lengthy, and it was a couple of days of intense training. And I watched it with it was almost like there was another being behind me sort of narrating to me, like, look at this, look at that, look at this, da, 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 da. And from every diagnosis I could put a spiritual, I don't want to say spiritual spin on it, but a spiritual diagnosis as you know. And so I'd love to hear, sorry, that was very lengthy. I'd love to hear like your thoughts on things like, you know, psychosis, borderline person, you know, I mean, we don't have to go into detail of each one, but I know that I used to joke with my students and used to say to them that if, you know, because of my abilities as a, you know, a psychic or, you know, empath, I said, you know, if I went to a doctor and said, I hear voices, I have spirits talking to me, you know, I can be high, I can be very depressed, I can be very anxious. I said, I would get every label under the sun. And we would kind of joke about that, but I was quite serious too, you know. So, take it away.
Yeah, well, look, as you know, luckily for me, when I was doing my mental health nursing, you know, back in the day, when it's been a while, I guess I was opening to your concepts. So a lot of what I sort of look at now is sort of in retrospect, you know. I mean, I always knew, as I said, I always knew that I do believe it's a spiritual condition, and that we're treating it as a physical condition. And or not all, I'm just thinking about your audience. So if someone's got a paranoid schizophrenic in the family, or someone with bipolar or personality disorder, I'm certainly not doing this as a blanket, you know, you know, reflection. Everyone's different, but I really do believe that a lot of people that are in mental, you know, health institutions are empathic, spiritual people that are tuned in or more easily influenced by entities or even just the energies from other realms, you know. And this is well known in every other culture except Western culture.
Right?
Yeah, it's treated as a spiritual awakening in most cultures, and there's a you know, the community come together and support the person, whereas we teach it as pathology. and we give medications that only subdue, really. There's nothing, I haven't seen, I guess certainly it might keep someone from harming themselves because they're subdued, but they're still under the influence of the voices, and the voices are definitely the people. No one has great hallucinations, I can tell you that. No paranoid schizophrenic, if that's a terrible label, isn't it? It means split schizophrenia, means split mind. But no one has a nice voice saying, oh gee, you're looking great today, aren't you a top person? No. They get all the voices telling them how useless, worthless and horrible they are, and what horrible things are going to happen to them, and who's spying on them. Strangely, the CIA are always spying on them with cameras, you know. So looking back, I laugh, if you know what I'm talking about, you know, like if we know about what's really going on other realms. They're just picking up on things that are that are, you know, what I'd say now are real, you know.
It's actually real, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure I can share this because I had a friend of mine recently go to a psych appointment, and she messaged me afterwards, and she's very clued in, but she has to go for, you know, certain reasons. And she said, do you know what he asked me? And I was like, oh God, because I've heard some stories. I'm like, oh my goodness, tell me. And she said, he asked me if I was paranoid that there, what was it, that there was microchipping in the jab, and that it was a direct link to Donald Trump to then talk to Bill Gates and spy on. And I went, he did not say that. She said, I mean, I'm not saying it verbatim. Yeah. And she said, yeah, he did. And she goes, it was kind of tongue in cheek, but he was trying to ask questions to gauge her level of paranoia.
Yeah, that's so funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it's expected. Well, I might fail on that myself.
I know, right? I just thought, oh.
Maybe not the Donald Trump talking to Bill Gates bit, but the other bits, yeah. Can you? Oh, yeah, sorry, can I be excused for 1 second? Thank you.
So, just talking about, there's some real, you know, places that you want to go and experiences that you want to share. So I'm going to sort of hand it over to you now.
Oh, thank you.
So we can get there, and I'm not going to interrupt anymore.
No, that's fine. That's great that you do. I like to hear what you have to say. It's really relevant to what we're talking about. First of all, I mean, there is a joke amongst psychiatric nurses that are a bit more aware that, you know, psychiatrists are glorified drug dealers. Okay, so just thought I'd just throw that one in there. And the psychiatrists I've met have pretty much they're very intellectual people, but they're really into the system, so they're not looking out of it. And they're smart people, but they're not spiritually always at that vibration where they understand what else is going on. So I find that a lot, you know, sometimes the smartest, most intellectual, most learned people are the ones that least get what they're dealing with. So just thought I'd throw that in there. And, you know, nothing against psychiatrists, you know, it's a hard job, but it's, you know, they're taught by the institutions, and the institutions don't want people to get better, because if people are getting better, then I guess, you know, entities aren't being fed is probably the best way of putting it. Yeah. So what I understand now, there's a book that I talked to you about earlier. Did you write that down? Because I always forget the name of it.
Right here, I just looked at it. So it is called An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower.
That's by Jerry Marcinski, I think it is, and someone Sweeney. I think there's a female helped him, or
Sherry Sweeney.
She helped him write the book, and he was a mental health worker I think it was in Georgia in America, and he's done interviews. And I really suggest people look this up with Jay Widener, and he talks about his experience. I think he worked in like one of the biggest institutions in the world, which had 23,000 patients, big asylum in Georgia. And he came to the conclusion that archonic or demonic or dark entities, you know, are at, you know, the cause of a lot of mental illness. And that their influence is, you know, unrelenting, ceaseless, malevolent voices and, you know, torment to these people. And if you speak to someone with paranoid schizophrenia, they are tormented. It's ceaseless. It's never ending. It's mainly auditory hallucinations. Really rare to get a visual one. They do happen. You know, I've seen people say, I've seen a purple snake float by, and it's like, oh, okay, you know, fine. You know, they do get it, but it's really unusual. So, and it's always, you know, people think it's their own voice, because, you know yourself, if you even do your own spiritual work, you know, it's really hard to differentiate between your own voice and the voice of your guides, or, you know, your higher self, or etc. So, you know, so immediately there's a label there. And, you know, I think it's Carlos Castaneda might have spoke about the archons too, but there's a lot of people that speak about this, and certainly shamanic practice in other cultures, they understand. that, you know, what we're looking at here is a spiritual condition. And I mean, I'd hate to sort of look at the cause of it, but, you know, giving medication isn't going to get rid of an entity, as you know. So if it is an entity involvement and it's nothing else involved, and it's, you know, not an actual, you know, physical something, but then I always look at it this way: if it's physical, then where did that voice come from? It's still, you know, it still has to come from somewhere, and we don't just have external voices chattering away at us. So they are things. And, you know, if I can have a spirit talking to me, or if I can, you know, talk to or have a guide or an angel, you know, there's always the opposite, isn't there? You know, and exactly. We are their food. We're energetically, they need to keep us miserable, need to keep us anxious, need to keep us angry. They need their loosh to keep us from, you know, to keep them going, really, you know. So when you think about, you know, why was there 23,000 people in the mental asylum? Why? Because, you know, do you know 23,000 mentally ill people? It's
huge numbers. Yeah,
you know, like, so, you know, think of it as a loosh factory. And, you know, and as we know how the system works, so knowing what I know now, why would you make someone better? I mean, you can keep them subdued and they're still a food source, aren't they? So, you know, that's how I kind of look at it. So that if you have listened to his interview with J1 or read his book, I think it'll be a real eye-opener just to give another perspective on what's really going on with, say, paranoid schizophrenia. And look, I'll tell you a story. So when I did start my psychiatric training, I worked in, I won't name this place, but I worked in another institution, wasn't Arundel. And I was looking after this beautiful young man, and he was, I think he was either 18 or 21. He was one of those sort of primary ages. I think might have been about 21, and I was a couple of years older. And he was just a gorgeous soul, gorgeous looking, soft, gentle, energy, beautiful. And he'd come in with psychosis. So he was this was in a, so it was an acute setting. He'd come in, you know, acutely unwell. And he'd been smoking a lot of marijuana, and this would be controversial too. Okay, so this marijuana can allow these entities in. I'm not saying with everyone, and I'm not saying don't smoke marijuana. It can be enhancing to spiritual experiences too, but unfortunately some people are susceptible. And I see auras too, and I can see when someone's been smoking marijuana, I can see the damage it causes. It looks like a big brown sludge to me on top of the head. I see it with my eyes. When that aura is more impaired, it looks like the top of the head is like a volcano firing out sludgy black, red, dirty oranges, dirty reds and blacks, you know, like that's what it looks like when someone's having psychosis. So I've sat down in groups and sort of tuned out, as you do, and then looked at the person, and you can tell they're talking, having voices, because they're muttering back to them. And that's what a psychosis looked like to me. I wasn't seeing the entity, but I could see the break in the aura where they were tuning into it. And going back to this young man, I'd like to mention his name, but it's an unusual name, and I know he's still got family alive. So I was a young student nurse, and we used to have to run groups, and he'd come up to me earlier with me getting to know him. He'd given me a book called The Guide to the Advanced Soul. Do you know that? You know that book?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
It's one of those books you can open up, and it has a really lovely saying of spiritual, you know, significance, and it inspires you. And we'd had sort of spiritual talk. So he's one of the first people to really make me think about more, you know, outside religion and new agey things. So he sort of got me on that path. And he said to me, Louise, he said, I'm not feeling well, you know, like, can I come and talk to you? And I said, look, I really can't at the moment. Can you find another nurse to talk to? I've got to run a group. I literally had to, you know, gather up a group. And he said, look, oh no, I'll be all right. I'll find someone, and, you know, I'll go and have a chat to someone. I said, are you sure? And he said, yep, no, that's fine. So he wandered off, and he wasn't looking psychotic or, you know, stressed. He wasn't pacing, or, you know, it was literally like we're talking now. So I thought, okay. And he wasn't in a psychosis at that time. So I went and did my group, and sort of passed him by, you know, and he was okay. And then I got called to look after someone in seclusion. So we, you know, that was the job you had to do. Sometimes literally sit with someone locked up, you know, on vinyl cushions. That's all you'd have, and just make sure someone didn't self-harm. So I got locked up, so I couldn't do anything. And I heard the alarms go off, and, you know, in the facility. for the emergency. And I thought, oh no. And I knew intuitively it was this young man. I thought, oh no. And what had happened was he'd done what he said. He went and spoke to someone and gone to play pool, because that was what everyone did. You played pool. And he'd gone to play pool with someone he'd developed a friendship with, and he was playing pool, and they were laughing and doing this thing. And apparently the next minute it was reported that he just went blank and he started running. He ran out of the building and he threw himself in front of a truck and died. And I knew something. I was so upset. I knew I couldn't have stopped it, but and what that is called a command hallucination. That's what we call it in psychiatry. So he got overtaken and he got taken out, basically, so that was my feel on it. He had so much to offer the world. He was a light soul. He would have been a light worker had he been able to continue, but he lost that. He lost his battle. And I think I'm telling you this story because I don't feel guilty, because I know I did all I could. It was just, but it taught me how strong and how dangerous these entities are. They are really able to, really disrupt and take our lives. And I had a lovely family, this young man, and the suffering that they would have gone through. Social media, I've kind of looked it up a bit, and I know he would have been an uncle, and he's missed out on a lot.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying. And with the marijuana, going back to that, back in when I did my nursing, that's what was the main drug of choice. There was a little bit of speed around, there wasn't a lot. So it was marijuana, and I'd watch every time. So you have the repeat people coming back in with a psychosis, and every time you'd see them, they'd lost part of their personality. So you'd watch people animated, funny, nice people, and then the next time you see there's less of them, they're just, the light's gone out of their eyes, and they're more taken over, is what I would say, until there's very little left of that original personality. So
you're sparking so much, because I am reflecting on, and thank you for sharing that, and that's really heartbreaking, but I think I think when someone passes, suddenly obviously there is a higher perspective to that, and the impact and influence that it shares in the community to make a positive change is one perspective of it, but also the severity of these entities and what they're capable of doing. And I know that the intrusive thoughts are always quite nasty and devastating, and they do talk about self-harm or to to kill yourself or things like that. I've been witness.
They do. They really do. And I remember there was another young man who was a champion tennis player of like just not the world, just normal in his area. It's a great athlete, and he became psychotic, and he tried to kill himself, and he ended up just losing his legs on the train lines. You know what I mean? So there was I could tell you a million stories like that. When Jeff Kennett, the darkest soul in Victoria, shut down all the institutions, he the amount of people that died shutting down those asylums, like that I personally, I knew there was this beautiful girl that I knew, again, very creative, artistic. They always are, they're lovely people.
I was about to say, it's always the lightest souls that are the most effective.
And she needed, people sometimes, even though that's all we had, they were asylums, they were needed, and of course they made it, the hospital system doesn't work in a hospital at all. It's ridiculous. But, I remember hearing that they found her body on on a railway embankment. She'd probably overdosed, just didn't find her. Do you know what I mean? Like, because we lost a lot of people. They ended up on the streets, they ended up not being cared for. And so for him to be the head of Beyond Blue is just like the biggest, blackest joke. He's I anyway, that's my thing. He's got a lot of blood on his hands, that person, as far as I'm concerned. And again, putting the psych into a hospital setting doesn't work. Now you go into a hospital and they're having to lock down the maternity wards because the psych wards are nearby. It just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. And I think, like, the examples that you're talking about with people who are having drug induced, like, psychosis and episodes and stuff like that, that are directly linked to substance abuse. I mean, I think now, like then and now, right? Because you've got things like ice and
I wouldn't work now. I actually wouldn't work. I would not do it. It's too, not unless I was 6'4" and a man, I would not do it, because it's the entities that go through the ice addicts they're just violent.
They're incredibly violent, and I've seen
so that substance must align to the darkest of the dark, as far as I'm concerned.
And
look, I'll tell you another story. When I worked at Larundel, there was what I haven't touched upon is trauma and abuse. I'd say every single nearly every single young female patient would have had some kind of sexual abuse early in their life, if they're really disturbed, especially borderline personality disorders, like the really bad ones. I mean, what is a borderline personality disorder? Someone who's just, hello, someone who's really split and destructive. And so, I remember nursing this young girl, and it was tragic. She was maybe 20, and you couldn't even, so she's in Larundel, with the slip doors, and you're trying to get her to have a shower. She was so taken over. For her to feel safe, she had to count her steps, and if she miscounted, she'd have to start again. So you try and get her to the shower, and she'd be counting her steps, and then she'd miscount, and then she'd pace back to recount again. So it could take an hour to try and get her into the shower, and in the end, sometimes you'd have to get another nurse and literally drag her because she couldn't get to the toilet in time. She was often incontinent because she couldn't. So to try and keep herself feeling safe with her counting, she couldn't survive, really. We literally sometimes had to just about feed her because of her compulsions, and I always felt she had been really traumatically abused at some point too, and that was her only coping mechanism. So
I guess that brings up another point and my own curiosity, because I mean, people who are susceptible to, like, it's a flow-on effect that stems from trauma, doesn't it? Really, when you want to, I always look at wanting to trace back the original trauma to start a healing process for people, and there's layers to that, because sometimes you can't go back to the core wounding. You got to peel it back in layers because it is very traumatic. And I guess what comes to mind is, like, yes, there's a lot of probably sexual abuse, but and then that then leads to behaviors, and then dependency on drugs or alcohol, and then the entity, it's just this snowball effect, really, if there isn't proper healing or acknowledgement. But did you, to your knowledge or thought, were you dealing with, like, people who were MK, like mind controlled, MK Ultra or SRA? I mean, I know that probably would never be disclosed, but just from your reflection, did you see?
In retrospect, all I don't want to say too much, but that young man, there's family bloodlines. Okay. The firstborn sons are quite susceptible, to stuff. Don't want to say too much. I think I've seen bloodline. In fact, I know I have. I'll give you an example that won't talk out of. Okay, so this is quite funny. There's this lady that I nursed, and she was really disturbed. She was in her 60s, and normally she was very religious and petite and proper, and literally wear the little pearls and twin set, type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there'd be another side of her when she was psychotic, which would be highly sexualized, and she'd be putting on the sexy clothes and the long boots, and the whole kit and caboodle, and be very inappropriate sexually. Okay, and that's a big thing. So anyway, one day I was walking into the ward, and she'd done the boot thing, and she'd had her skirt on, and she yelled at me, and she said, "Look at me, I'm Satan's bride." And she flipped up and she was saying, "F me, Satan, F me, Satan," at the top of her voice. And this is at an aged ward at this point, because she was over 60. So you got all the old people around, and she's doing this, and she, exposing her genitals and putting herself in the position to be done. And so in retrospect, looking at her, she was from a bloodline family. Okay. And she was looked after by, this is a whole other story, and I don't want to sound like one of these storytellers, but my mum worked as a housekeeper for people in a very rich area, and she worked for families with the names of the 13 families that were industrial families, and she was associated with one of those families, and she had the son of one of those families who actually was babysat with. I got to see him, and he was her friend, and he was unstable himself, and so I do believe sometimes we get the spillover from those that have been MK'd from being bloodlined, and they've got too out of control that even their own families can't control them. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
they end up in the system. So
I mean, it's so fascinating, and I think I don't know how to say this nicely. I'm trying to polite my words, but there's no polite way in saying it.
Mm-hmm.
In the research that I've done around these sort of trauma-based mind control programs that kicked off just after Second World War, they're horrific in what they would do to people, and that I think they have refined that technology, and it's not as horrific as they kind of worked out what they were doing. It was all experimental, but and that's the whole point that I'm getting to, is it was experimental. They didn't know, everyone's different people, so
and look, I think I do. I guess what I didn't touch upon too is because I come from a Freemasonic line on my father's side, and it's also like a royal side. There's a royal line on that side too. Not that I'm royal. We were turnip farmers in the 17th century. There was no royalty, but the bloodline is royalty.
Bloodline.
Okay. We're talking back to Viking, Saxon kings, William the Conqueror, that type of thing. So certainly there's no royalty from the 17th. We can see there's no money or royalty, but the bloodline.
That you're aware of, maybe there is.
Yeah. And I wouldn't want to be really associated, but it is there, and I do think bloodlines play a big part of susceptibility. Look, I don't think I did see too many in psych, to be quite honest, because they wouldn't be there for all the other reasons. They'd be probably taken out if they got too hard to manage. But I did, and I think I might have mentioned this just briefly on, as we know, the dark, some of them worship Baphomet, which is a transgendered, god being. And I did grow up with a family that I know were from those families. Well, I won't say the words. And they transgendered for sure. I know this for a fact. Their son, the firstborn son, into a daughter, and I grew up with the daughter who as a child. So and they were quite wealthy. And they, the family's still alive, and they live a nice life. You know what I mean? Wealthy life where the money was never an object. So not overly wealthy, but small level. So I do. And their Bavarian background, the Bavarian branches of the, so I know it's done, and that was done in the 60s. Okay, so we're talking 65. Yeah. So that person is now identifying as a lesbian, and so, and you would not choose it. You would not see that person was ever of the opposite sex. So I do believe that happens. I believe that they do sacrifice the firstborn son in some way, shape, or form. And also in my own family history, my great greats were head of Freemasons. And if you know anything about Freemasons, you know that there's a 7 generational curse that goes with it. And that's certainly affected my family. My father was the firstborn son, and he certainly would have, as I said, he had a forceps delivery, and there was a bit of a brain injury, and that caused his behaviours. Even though he was a nice and intellectual man, his impulse control was really bad, and if there was alcohol involved, he was certainly susceptible to entities. All of I won't go into every family, but I've got a lot of half sisters from my dad's first marriage. I've got my one sister, the firstborn son was killed in a car accident in his early 30s. The second son was brain injured through encephalitis. Her daughter died in her 30s from breast cancer. And another cousin who's very into, I'd say he's an active member. His wife was in a car accident with her babies and her toddlers, and his firstborn son's now intellectually disabled, and he lost his wife in an accident. And my auntie's first son was born stillborn, and that had a profound effect. And I could tell you there's more and more and more right through, and it's like beyond coincidence. I can tell you about my own family and my own sons and things, but I won't. But I do believe that having this awareness helps us to actually heal our family line. And that's what I believe, that I do have the awareness, because if you think about it, it's unbelievable. I know, right? It is unbelievable, but statistically, it's, just in my own family, it's not believable. Like, it's not possible and I haven't told you the half of it. So it's, I think we need to be aware that there are curses, and there are agreements and contracts, and it's really a good idea to find someone who can clear those. I certainly had to clear myself of something that to do with all that, which I didn't know what it was until I moved it, and my life changed from the moment that was moved. I had less bad luck, better interpersonal relationships, and I guess, no one wants to acknowledge that they've had an entity, or they've, because everyone wants to think they're all love and light, sweetness, and that's the biggest trap. You have to look at your dark side, you have to look at your shadow, and then
and I often say this, there's so much power in our shadow when we can acknowledge it and understand it for what it is, and work with it in a positive manner. But I'm so glad we're having this conversation. It's not spoken about near as much as it should be, and I think that's the only way that individuals and humanity can move together and heal, is to acknowledge that these things exist. It is the very, very starting point of a healing journey, and I know that it's very confronting too.
It really is, and I look at the other things that we don't talk about, like do you want to talk a little bit about some of my other experiences out of psychiatry? Is that all right?
Sure.
I could go on about psychiatry, but I can only be telling you, I'll just be the same, but darker and darker and darker. But so, opening up, and again, I just want to emphasize, I live my life. I go out shopping, I do things, and I'm not meditating every day like I probably should be.
You're having a human experience.
Look, there's things I do avoid. I don't watch a lot of movies. I don't watch the news. I avoid that, the programming as much as I can. I have little things I do watch, but even they're just filled with all the symbols, so they just gets annoying after a while. But look, my biggest awakening would have been in 2016 when I first saw my first chemtrails, and that's I know.
You're bad that year.
That was a shocking year. Yeah. And I guess that was the first time I realized that we're actually in a war of consciousness here, and that, you know, that there is something happening and that most people are unaware of it, and some people may never be aware of what's going on, but we are. And coming from that, I realized that I am someone that, you know, I do get overtaken and I just have to clear grids. I was doing all this grid and work and I didn't even know what I was doing, but I'd sit in the car park before I went to the shops. All of a sudden I had to clear grids. I'm like, what am I doing? I didn't know. And then I found out about what it was. So, and I guess we all have our own mission to do bits and bobs, just to hold the light, to have a bit of fun, have a bit of humour, laugh at ourselves, laugh at the dark, because they are funny. Let's face it.
I often go, wow, that was clever. Like, I'm impressed at the trickery. You know.
Yeah, like they really are great at what they do. Like, let's face it. But you know, it's a step too far, and it's time that we came out of that. Now this, as you know, I don't have to tell you this, the planet's doing its thing and she doesn't want that anymore. So we're all here to help her along the way. We've put our hands up, so that's what we do. So, you know, that's why I'm telling you about the dark. I want people to know to clear their dark, but not to focus on it, is what I'm saying. You know, just to have an understanding. So they do have relative, they understand what might be going on. You might not be able to do anything about it, but you can reconcile it in yourself, you know. So
I've beautifully said, and I agree, like, you don't want to give it too much emphasis where it consumes you and has a negative effect, but if you don't acknowledge it, it's going to continue giving you bad luck or making you feel lousy, or, you know, whatever it is that is impacting. So, you know, clearing ancestral lineage and clearing entities and all that, you know, I feel like I've been knees deep in this work for so long.
But it does work, doesn't it, Alisha? That's why you were called. It works and it changes people's lives and it puts them on their mission, and that's why we're here. And you know, and it doesn't matter if your mission is just to be a really good person and be a good member of your family. That is enough. That is holding the light. That is anchoring it into the planet. You don't have to be a great psychic or great medium or a great anything, or have any skills with other than being aware of your own consciousness, really.
100%. And I think my passion stems, I mean, and there's so many reasons why I'm so passionate about this topic and what we're talking about, but, you know, what sparked along the lines for me is that, you know how you just fall into things, like things just sort of happen and you go, oh, okay, like there's a path opening up for me. But, you know, entity attachment is not something I ever advertise that I do, like removal, you know, but I do, and I do it well. And I think that's just experience of my own darkness of, like, I say, for 10 years I was taunted and attacked heavily by entities. And I mean, through claiming my own sovereignty and learning how to clear myself, I can then help support others. But a lot of people would come to me with suicidal ideation or having, you know, like very bad things happen to them, and I would tune in and there's like a reptilian or a demonic or whatever it was. I mean, I've seen some way out gnarly shit, I won't lie. And the way that I sort of work on, like, clearing it and then giving people tools to protect and clear their own energy ongoing, because you have to maintain that.
It's not a one-stop shop. It's like, and just as you think you're right, they find another way, you know. It's around health or around your relationships with your family, and, you know, like, they're so sneaky. You know, I think I said it before we started today, you know, they even got my cat to be a pain in the butt, do naughty things, you know, just enough to upset you. And they like a little upset. They like a big upset, but they like a little upset too.
And look, I've got stories for days, right? We could film stories for days, and maybe we will do some more of this if people are resonating and want to hear this stuff. But I had God, I learn a lot through my sessions. I really do. But, you know, a lot of people talk about these karmic relationships, right? And you hear that term being thrown around so much. And this concept came to me in a session of a dear friend of mine. I'm sure she won't mind me sharing. I won't use her name, but she was going through a lot of entity attachments that was working through her family. So through a connection who was still in a karmic relationship, and they had sort of a spiritual connection, just to paint the scene. And then there was like a lot of really unpleasant things happening to a group or community of people that were connected. And so when I went to try to find the root cause, what I was shown was that there was an entity attachment that is assigned to karmic connections, right? So it helps the magnetism and the you know, in the beginning where there's that intense magnetism and draw to one another, which can be for various reasons. And there's always purpose for this, but it was like when you know how people say after 6 months and there's like the honeymoon period is over.
Yeah.
I was literally seeing entities that kind of hover over that and like feed the loosh.
Yeah.
Every time they have an argument and then exacerbate drama and, you know, chaos. And, you know, yeah, that can happen, but we can also not allow that to happen if we're conscious of that, of those things. And just to give an example of that, you know.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because guess that my entity did exactly that.
Oh,
yeah. When I had my entity, if there was any drama in my marriage, and I'm married to the most on my second marriage. Both my husbands were lovely people. I'm not just, but I'm on the second marriage now. And my husband now is like a Reiki master. He's very spiritual. We met in spiritual circle. Like I always have a joke about that, because I don't think you've ever watched that comedy show with Magnus Stavansky in it, and I can't think, it was the same group that did Kath and Kim, sort of that type of thing. And they had a skit about Sky from Spiritual Circle, you know. So I always laugh, because it was like, and she did this spell, and you know, and I always laugh and think it's pretty much like this, because you have the politics in circle as well. But I met him in a spiritual circle where we're doing a little bit of mediumship and channeling, because I've always touched upon it, you know, like after I sort of had my awakening, I did all that. And he is lovely, and he is very sensitive, and he's someone in his thoughts a lot. Okay, so when he has an influence, we all get negative influence. It's in his thoughts, and I had this big fat reptilian entity that I didn't realize I had. Just a clue that my left eye was impaired, and I was starting to get sort of, you know, liver spots around it, and you know, it was sort of a bit squinty, you know, compared to the other eye, like, you know, all the signs you see. You know, I was like, oh, what's going on here? You know? So I thought, when I went to remove it, I thought I was just removing an implant of some sort, you know. But it turned out it was a big entity, and he said, please don't remove me. I don't want to go. I don't want to leave. I could hear his voice. It took me a whole night to leave. And then I realized when it left what it was. I could see it was a reptilian. That's a whole other story. But while this, and it was a male, and while this male reptilian, because I always felt very masculine, you know, and I'm thinking, why am I feeling masculine? Because I'm a very girly girl, as you can see. I like to, you know, but always had this masculine energy, and it's definitely gone, thank goodness. But if my husband and I had a disagreement, I would just be pursuant in it and over the top and blah, blah, blah. And I can win an argument with him because, you know, I was the queen of manipulation with this entity. As soon as that entity went, I never, ever wanted to do that. You know, I might just be slightly annoyed and I'd just go, meh, and walk away. But with the entity, for years, I would be, blah, 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 and he'd have his own. I could see sometimes he'd have something attachment, you know, because of his thoughts. Sometimes they prey on you. They're like octopusy ones that can prey on your thoughts. So, and because I can see it, I could see it in him, but I couldn't see it in me.
Yeah.
And it had a devastating effect on our relationship. And the change, you know, both spiritual people, we weren't doing anything spiritual at all. We're too busy being narky, you know, not all the time, but when it happened, it was devastating. So, you know, it really does, it can slow you down in your mission. It can slow you down on, you know, it can destroy relationships. And that's what they want too.
I was about to say, and the breakdown of relationships and important soul connections, and, you know, I mean, all are, but like you're seeing it more and more. I mean, I hear daily about people who are families being torn apart, and you know, you kind of, when you take it in that bigger vantage point of looking at the energetics and all those things, I think there's a lot more solutions when you look at it from that vantage point.
They need more of you, Alisha, you know. And, you know, I do the occasional, because I'm still working in the mundane world, as I call it, but I still get called to do things.
You're exactly where you need to be for now.
Yeah. And and I just got taken out of a big health.
I was going to say,
yeah, I just got taken out of that. So my I don't want to say too. Look, I was doing aged care assessment, so I wasn't working. I was working as a nurse, as an aged care assessor, so going to people's homes and helping them to get home care packages or sign them up so they can have respite in a nursing home. So it's a government job. It's through the Department of Health. So I was doing that until 4 weeks ago. Been doing it for pretty much 10 years, and it is a nursing clinical role. And I actually do get anaphylaxis, and I actually had an anaphylactic response to a moisturiser a year before COVID, and ended up in an ambulance and A&E with my throat, closing over. And I've had a few of those anaphylactic responses in the past. Aerogard is one, hey.
Oh,
So I know, great. So like, and I'm carrying EpiPen. I've got antihistamines. I have to be careful because it's just something that I get. I'm sensitive, and I'm sensitive to other things as well, a lot of substances and chemicals. So I'm sensitive to the flu vaccinations, and so when it was mandated, I didn't want to have the thing, because there's a component in the thing that is actually the same as in the moisturisers. So of course I was actually terminated from my job for a little while I was trying to fight having it, before I actually got an exemption. So I've got the golden Willy Wonka ticket and got the exemption.
Yeah, they're not easy to come by.
No, and I've got a very conservative doctor, but she said I was at risk. I was too much. She wouldn't do it. I was too much at risk. There was no doubt I was going to go into anaphylaxis. Yeah. Okay, so basically, the long journey since October last year was, they reinstated me because I got the exemption. But I've been working from home anyway, because everyone was. I was doing my appointments via telehealth or the phone. And so, but then there was a little bit of an issue with the mask. And there was, anyways, because I'm allergic to chemicals, and the N95 masks, I don't know if you've smelt them, you might as well just put a chemical factory on your face, so again, I just didn't want it. So long story short was, I could have continued in my role on the phone. There was so much work I could have done. I was doing another role that didn't need me to be face-to-face at all. But because I didn't fit into the system, I got managed out. I was given a form from the system from those above, saying that they wanted me to see an immunologist or go and see an independent medical examiner that they'd pay for, in the city. But the questions that they were asking was, can I have the COVID-19 vaccination, and what ingredients am I allergic to? So initially I got the green tick, and I know, I'm not the most courageous person. I probably would have got the thing if I wasn't allergic, to be quite honest. I probably would have caved. I'm not as courageous as, say, Dale Holmes or other people like himself. He's been inspirational for me to actually fight. Because of him, I fought more. So I fought it and got the union in, but they were literally telling me off the record at times to go and have this, first on the record, then off the record, that I should just go and have the thing, but I'd have it under supervision in an emergency department and under 24. And I'm not kidding, they did that to other people that I know of that were highly allergic, who caved and did it. And I said, I'm not prepared to do that. I'm not prepared to do it once, twice, thrice, might get through the first time, but the second time, with allergies, they intensify.
Mm-hmm.
Who's to say I'd come back with adrenaline? Who's to say my heart wouldn't stop and I'd have to be resuscitated? Who's to say I didn't become a vegetable? Who's to say I wouldn't die, stroke out? So you and I know, I know lots of people. I watch the statistics of the people in my health department, because they run them up every week about how many people came in with the virus, and the staff that were cycling through that were done once, done twice. There were still hundreds of people going through, being off work with the virus, even after the second. And I did get the virus, and everyone's like, oh, if you get it, you're going to die. No, it was like a bad flu. And I got it again because I got it from the vaccinated members of my family, I've got to say. So like, I just want to tell you that. And I didn't even get it as bad as them. Yeah. So even on the second time, it was like, if you want to call it, and I'm, I'm talking to the initiator, we know about what it really is. And I particularly think I actually think it comes from the trails, to be quite honest. I feel every time I see the trails that seems to be in the next couple of weeks, it's all coming through, you know what I mean?
I agree. And like I said to you, like I've got scratchy throat and that, and I think that mine is more detox symptoms. But I've had a little chat around this morning in the last day, because then everyone's got flu symptoms again. And I was like, and they're spraying pretty hard in Queensland, Sunshine Coast. Yep. And so I totally agree with you. I think it's coming through the chemtrails, and I think the weather manipulating, all of that.
And the frequencies, the trails, along with the changes of the frequencies to lower your system down. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, I was saying to you earlier, like I went through that hair loss, very unfortunate hair loss that a lot of women who are unvaccinated have gone through this year. A lot of them have been at rallies or Canberra. And I woke up one night, because I get intuitive hits, and the first round of COVID that I had was not a natural virus. I know that it was artificial.
You can really tell, can't you? There's a metallicness about it, isn't there? I don't know if you lost your smell and taste and as well for the first one, and you just know. Like, I don't understand why people don't know. Like, it's so different to anything else.
And look, I'll tell you the backstory. I think I already shared this with you, but I know that was sort of a targeted attack, because 2 days before you mentioned those octopusy things, I was sort of in a battle with one of them, trying to like, and then the next day I kind of thought, when I did it, because I was doing some sort of clearing out in space, as I do anyway, and I thought, am I going to get a repercussion from that? Because I know when I've had altercations with reptilians and that, there is a bit of a lashback that can occur.
Oh, really? No.
and I do things without thinking, and then I go, God.
Oh no, don't do that.
And I had this black spiky metallic ball appear in my bedroom less than 24 hours before I got sick. And I had a few other healers that I know got sick around the same time, saw the same thing. And I truly think that my losing my hair and all that was due to like more of radiation poisoning.
Sure, that would make sense. Yeah. And they are hitting us with those frequencies. I think just going back to your spiky ball, I think I mentioned to you too. For me, it was 2 weeks. I tend to manifest illness 2 weeks after I see it in the aura. Or if I see someone's aura, it seems to be 2 weeks. And I woke up and I got such a fright. I thought I saw the biggest huntsman I've ever seen in my life. It was the size. It was like that big, And I said to my husband, and then it just disappeared like that. And it was one of those astral spiders, and that's when I got my second lot of COVID. So, and I am arachnophobe. I'm just I'm sorry if I see one in the house and it's real. That was astral. It'll be taken. I'll get my husband if they're big to take them out, but otherwise, my thing is, if you come to my house, you will be dispatched to another realm. I'm sorry, you've made your choice.
I'm the same, and I actually think it's my experiences on Mars with those those car-sized spiders, I think, is where my fear comes from, but that's a whole other story. But amongst my friends, we call them spider bots, because they're part AI.
Aren't they just horrific?
And when they start appearing to me in like the astral realm, and like I get creeped out because I can feel the energy of them, and pretty much not long after that they will manifest, and I will get a massive spider or a deadly spider in my home. I've even had attacks without spiders. Literally, I've had like I've got a black cat, but like a feral black cat come to my back door and scratch out and go,
you know, like at the middle of the night, like how creepy, it's like a horror movie.
Yeah.
And then that same night, like all maggots came out of my kitchen, like, you know, it's, you know, those real horrible things, you know, you tell people, they just think you're nuts. But look, let's face what we're talking about. And speaking of nuts, I'll give you a few more things just so you can have a bit of fun. Yes. So back in 2010, I moved to Frankston, you know, and Frankston, that's my stomping ground. I grew up in the Pines in Frankston, which is, for people that don't know, that's a housing commission estate with a real reputation of being a rough and ready place. And it has a spirit of place there. It's a really dark entity that is around in the Pines. So that was my hop, you know, and there's a lot of mentally ill people that are attracted to that area. So just, you know, to set the scene. But we weren't in the Pines, but we're right next door to the Pines. So I was living the second time. And also, I think the Pines, I think Frankston is a very big town of the, you know, I hate to say the word because they're not illuminated, but it's one of those towns. Mm-hmm. So it's just got the vibe. And so, yeah, I was living there. My husband and I were just going out to get some shopping. You know, it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, followed the kids in the car and let's go shopping. Looked up and there was a dragon in the sky. I kid you not. Like, we were just doing mundane family things and like, what's that big flapping thing in the sky? It's a dragon. And you could see the leathery wings. It was, you know, I thought it was, you know, it could have been a pterodactyl, but it looked like a dragon, you know what I mean? Yeah. So obviously seeing something interdimensionally. So these are funny little things that sort of happen along the way.
It reminds me of a session I did once. And it was a new client, a male client. First time we'd met, and I was tuning in and I saw what I believed to be like a pterodactyl or a dragon circling him. And I didn't even feel confident in saying that because I thought this guy was quite, you know,
conservative.
Yeah, conservative. That's a good word. And then I kind of very shyly said, I know this is going to sound very strange, but there's a dragon or a pterodactyl that like is flying around you. And I just, you know, my protocol is share everything and, you know, whatever. And at the end he goes, I'm so glad you picked that up. He goes, that's one of my guides. And he went crazy.
That's funny.
I'm like, yeah.
Well, we haven't told many people about that one because, you know, you don't think of dragons flying over Frankston, you know.
I'm always curious when people talk about dragons. What color was it?
It looked leathery. It was high, but you could see, you know, it was like a brownie color, but it was not a bird. It was not a plane. It was not a drone. Drones weren't even around there, you know, like it was. Yeah. And of course,
it dropped into.
It was dimensional. I think it just dropped in, just sort of flapped through, you know. And I think, you know, I've been looking at a bit of the Tartaria stuff and the mud flood stuff. Not a lot because I'm not really right into it, but what my take on that, and I, you know, might be just a little bit of it anyway, is that some of those buildings that look like they're mud flooded might have come through from another dimension, from another plane. So they're coming in slightly into the earth, you know, because they've come in on from a different spot, so they're not sitting where they normally would have been, because it's, you know, our planes are all just above each other. Yeah. So and you know, I have been Mandela affected quite significantly.
Please, yes, can you?
Yeah, look, the Mandela effect is probably, I mean, the chemtrails started to blow me open, especially when I started seeing chemtrails being made by cigar-shaped flying saucers, sphere flying saucers, and sphere flying saucers with holograms planes over them. So this is over Somerville in Victoria. Like, you know, again, you know, I just see these things. I don't see them all the time. This is just, you know, they might be one-offs or two-offs. These are, but it's to show me. Yeah. I've seen daylight craft. I've seen blue beams coming through the sky, and there's, you know, there's no sun's on the other end. You know, so I see lots of weird and wonderful things at times. I've seen a fairy. You know, literally, and you know, I've seen a Black Panther tail in the bush, you know, like just the tail slipping into the bush. Yeah. And it wasn't a cat's tail, it was massive, you know. But my dad saw a Black Panther back in Brighton 70s as well. So
well, yeah, there's a myth that they're around my area in the Dandenongs.
Oh, I think they would be, and I think they're interdimensional most of the time as well. I think the Yowie, the Yowies and the Dandenongs as well. So I believe the cryptoids are there, but they can phase in and out. Same with this little fairy. I was literally watering my friend's fairy garden, not thinking about fairies, and it just like Tinkerbell came in front of me. I've seen an angel. I did a little very short stint in palliative care, and I was holding the hand of this poor gentleman who's probably my age now, and he had, the lung disease caused from asbestos, and he was absolutely in agony. It's such a painful thing. And we had to give him ketamine and knock him out because that's all that could contain it. So I was sitting with him while the ketamine was taking effect, just in holding his hand because, and I was early in the morning and I could see across to the room across the way, and there was a little old lady in there, probably in her 80s, and I think she had like a vaginal cancer, something awful, and horrible thing for an old lady to have. And she was dying as well, and palliative care. And I looked up, and sitting on her bed next to her was an angel, a gold angel. And I saw I was seeing things, so I looked away and looked back and stayed there for about 10 minutes in my view. And it was, so I think I get shown these things just to show that they're there. I'm not seeing them all the time. I do see auras a lot, and I can see disease in auras. I can see when people have got brain tumours or heart problems and things, but not all the time. It's only when I'm meant to.
Exactly.
I'm not switched on all the time, certainly. So
well, before we wrap up, can you tell us one or two Mandela effect?
Oh yeah, okay. Okay. Well, I'll be 56 in a couple of weeks, so I've been on the planet or in this realm or wherever it is. I think I've been here for a while, but but not this particular one. So to me, I loved geography and I loved history. So I had a good memory for, the geography of the world. So I've lived on the Mornington Peninsula most of my life as well. So one of the big ones is for me, remember everyone's in a different place, was the Port Phillip Bay has changed significantly. It used to be, I'm pretty sure it used to be bigger, but it used to be the shape of a pear or a uterus. It was, a little bit of distortion maybe on this side, but pretty much that shape, okay, with the, the little heads.
Yeah.
Now it's like this, and then there's this like a big like snake appendage that comes out to the side, and every time I look at it, it looks, that bay appendage looks a bit wider. So, and not only that has that changed, but physically I can see it when I look at the land masses. When I go on the peninsula, I can see that mass that wasn't there before, So, and when I look at the maps, things change and move. There's a map here of on the wall. I can't show you because it'll distort it, but I've got a map of Italy, and that's like the whole world map has changed for me. There's nothing the same. Germany used to not have a shoreline. Now Germany has a coastline. In the war, in my reality, Poland was above Germany. Germany was a landlocked country, and when they launched their U-boats, they launched them from the Netherlands. Now it's got a shoreline. I know they're silly things, but there's been the Azores, the Azore Islands. They've turned up in my reality. They weren't there before because I studied geography. The Scilly Islands off the coast of Cornwall have turned up. They were never around. There's weird things. The county names have changed in England. There's just counties have turned up. My doctor, we used to have a chat with my doctor just on a personal level, and my middle son's the same age as her son, and she had a photo of her son on her desk, and he's like out with a lake and a mountain behind him, and we discussed our sons of that age. And the next thing, that photo disappeared, and she started talking about her two sons, and the other son was 2 years older, and that was not ever the story, and that photo's gone. And I spoke to the receptionist. I was like, "Has the doctor got two sons?" "Oh yeah." And it's like, I've been seeing her for 5 years, and we have this conversation about our one son, and I've got an older son too, so we could have discussed our two older sons, So, and that's not an uncommon thing, people coming in and out. What else were Mandelas? Just personally, I graduated as a psychiatric nurse. I've no memory of that graduation. I've got friends that can tell me about it, and I wasn't drinking because I was always a young mum. I was never someone that was out of my mind on substances or anything. And I literally have no memory of where, how, what, where, why. So I've got a lot of gaps like that. So, you know, I think there's been movement with my soul, you know.
Yep.
I've got a very bad memory for a lot of early childhood. There's a lot of blanks and gaps. It could be because of trauma, but, you know, there's things that should have stuck that are not there.
Yeah.
So I think as we move dimensions, or it could be a bit of soul moving in and out, you know, we have.
I was about to say, do you think that that's part of like a walk-in experience?
Yeah.
Or fractals of your own self?
Yeah. Because look, I was shown early in my spiritual development that I was shown a vision of each of us is like a diamond in space with all its facets, and we are that diamond, and each facet is us having simultaneous lifetime. So I was always aware that our guides are higher self, and, you know, that really was all us.
Yeah.
You know, there was never any doubt to me that was the case. So that, and that, you know, look, we're all just a spark of the creator, and, you know, we all are each other, really just experimenting. That's why it is a bit of a joke. Like, I know it's dark, and I know we do all this, and I can say we're having this battle and that battle, but really in the end, you know, the one thing that matters is kindness, compassion, you know, that's it, kindness and compassion, and love of self, love of others, be of service. You know, if you're selfish, acknowledge it and move on and do something to counteract it, you know, and if you're angry, you know, let it go and move on to the next thing. Don't hold on to resentment. You know, don't hold on to anything that's, you know, what do they say? If you resent or angry at someone, it's like wishing the other person dead and swallowing the poison yourself. And that says it all, doesn't it? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, Louise, I can't thank you enough. Like that's a beautiful reflective piece to end up on, I think, in terms of, you know, who we are and why we're here, and to you know, good, I don't want to say rules to live by, sorry, I'm losing my words here. Protocol to sort of, you know, live our human life and experience. But I just want to thank you so much, not only for the beautiful work that you are and how you express yourself in this lifetime, but coming on and sharing your time and sharing your experience and wisdom here with me and with the audience. And I hope that everyone who's watched this can take something away from it and allow it to shine a light or a perspective that maybe you haven't had. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Alisha, for all you've done. I've been following you for a while now, and I just loved you from the first moment I saw you. And Dale Holmes, I love his work. You know, he's just, you know, good stuff, isn't he? Isn't it?
Yes.
You know, it's just so nice to see a male, you know, doing it. And he's you guys are so wise, you know, because now I'm older, you know, I feel older, you know, you actually do. And to see your generation, you know, you're so much more clued in than we were. We were so not knowing, you know, under the veil. So
Oh, well, thank you. And hopefully maybe we'll get you on again. So like I would encourage people, if they have questions for you, when you've got time, obviously I don't want to put pressure on.
I'm just about to start a new job, but look,
but in time, you know, if people have any questions, you know, maybe we can revisit it sometime down the track.
I'd love to. I'd really, you know, if I guess if we can help anyone from our conversation today, then we've done our job, you know, and that's why we're here, isn't it? Just to be in service to others and to, you know, just have a bit of humour, everyone. You know, it's a little bit funny, like, you know.
You've got to laugh through these times right now, you know, and
you can have your cry, you can have your sob. I go and say, I'm stuck in the corner, you know, and then I just go, okay, I've had my sook now, it's out, you know, release it and move on, you know.
Actually, before we finish up, sorry, can't yet. I had no plan on sharing this, but I had a experience 2 nights ago. I'm going to share it, but I want to know your take on it, and if you've got any sort of similar information that's come through. So I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning, as you do, and I very much remember that I was standing in a group of maybe 8 to 12 beings, and they weren't human. They were extraterrestrial, of different races. and I was very short. I know I'm not I'm actually very short in my human body, but like they were towering over me. They were very, very tall, high dimensional beings that were having a meeting, and I was sort of being briefed or having a bit of interface with them, and all I remember them saying to me telepathically, it was more like a feeling. They said, we can no longer hold off the unfolding of what's about to occur on Earth. It's like we've held it off for so long, we can't anymore. So basically be prepared for the unfolding that's about to occur. I can't give any more details than that, and I certainly am not one to fearmonger. I think it's a necessary unfolding of whatever it is. And my sense was, this is my interpretation, that things are going to get a little bit bumpy for a bit before it balances out. And I felt that message was speaking of like not a future timeline in a year's time. I felt like it was an immediate message for now. Yeah.
It does feel, I agree. I think you're being told to prepare, and it doesn't mean, it doesn't hurt to have some extra rice in the house, but mentally you're being prepared, because you'll be needed to help the shockwaves that's going to come through people's emotions people are, even now, the only way I can say it is like they're going mad, aren't they? Like, you see it on the road, you see it in the people are going, they're not coping with the energies that are coming in. It's really discombobulating them. And I guess when the populace is confronted with the next thing, whatever it is, we have to hold ourselves the best we can, because we'll be the go-to people. And I think that's I agree. Be prepared. What did John Howard say? Be prepared and not alarmed, or something. There was something about terrorism, it's like, that type of thing. It's a bit like that. Don't allow it, don't focus on it, but get your rice and your lentils or whatever, or make sure you got some fresh water, make sure you got some cash or whatever, and don't buy into the fear. I think doesn't, we'll all survive. My mum survived the war. She was, had Nazis put guns to her head at 11, they were in the war in Europe. She lived outside of Auschwitz. They survived. We will all survive, to the best we can. And if we don't, we survive anyway. And if we die, we survive. So it doesn't matter about fear mongering. I think it's a wise thing. I think you're given a good message, and
that's why I felt compelled to share it and discuss it with you.
I think I'm hearing it from other people the same. That there is going to be some shocking things happen.
I agree, and it's funny because I'm a bit stubborn. Like, I don't listen to anyone. But if I get a message like that in my dream, I'll pay attention straight away. And so that's sort of the way that it comes through to me, that I pay attention. But I think that the guidance that I give to people is pay attention to your own intuition, and however that comes to you, to get prepared, whether it's food, money, mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
Buy some toilet paper, but I do laugh, but I do know from what you're saying, my dreams lately have been of astral wars. Does that make sense? I'm not in this reality or this realm, but I had one the other night, and it was to do with something to do with Hawaii, actually. I can't remember. When you're with people and there's a battle going on, and what as above, so below, as people like to say. But it's true, isn't it? So what's going on will translate here, and I feel like there is a quickening. There's a quickening in time. There's a quickening in consciousness. People are mad, but people are awakening up right at the moment too. So they're mad and irritable, but they're waking up. Great. You're warned.
And I just wanted to put that out and have so thank you for your take on it. And
they're good like that, aren't they? The galactic light beings,
Well, I know, and I spoke to a few friends, because I find that that's my dream recall. As long as I speak it out loud to someone else, I'll always recall it. I don't journal anymore.
Yeah.
And I spoke to a friend of mine, and she goes, "Oh, funny, I was in front of a council last night." I was like, "Oh, it's all going down there."
It is, yeah. Like there is something. You can actually feel it, you know. That's, and I know. Look, you know, instead of being around a few decades, so there's always been the thing, you know, 2012, MK, you know, what blah blah blah, you know, the 2000 way, but it is happening because we have the solid. Like this whole last 2 years has been, you know, we're having the solid build up to it. And that's why we're here.
Exactly.
You know, we came here for this. Yay! We chose it. We said we would do it. We came here and went, oh, a bit tough. Oh, but we chose it. Aren't we lucky? Not everyone got to be here.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Louise. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching. And yeah, we'll definitely come back and do this again at some point. So
right.
Wish you all the best for the new venture that you're journey. And just sending a lot of love to you and everyone out there. So stay strong, and we'll move through this period.
Yeah, we will, with strength and harmony. Yep. Most definitely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.